Okay, good morning, Rabbosai. Today's the 18th day of the Omer. We are on Yevamos, Daf Nun Ches. But we're going to start, that's right, the last two lines of Nun Zayin and Beis, and we'll get to the two dots at the bottom of Nun Ches and Beis. Today's daf is blissfully short and a little bit on the confusing side, so we're going to do our best. Okay. We are in the sugya of yesh chupal psulos or ein chupal psulos, and I thought it would be beneficial as we get rolling just to remind ourselves in the machlokas of Rav and Shmuel at the top of this amud. What are we talking about? Look at the first Rashi on the page, and then we'll dive into today's Gemara. Yesh chupal psulos. What is an example of that? Kohen gadol shehichnis almana bas kohen lechuppah. So you have a kohen gadol who brings a widowed daughter of another Kohen to the chuppah. What's the problem with that? The problem is that a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry an almana. Same way a Kohen Hedjoj is not allowed to marry a grusha or chalutza. V'lo ba'aleha. And in that case, the Kohen Gadol, while he brought this almana bas Kohen to the chuppah, they never had bia. Umeikara nami lo kitcha. And he was never mekadesh her first. I'm just doing the Rashi. The first Rashi on Nun Zayin and Beis, just to remind ourselves what a good case of yesh chupal psulos. This is within the opinion of Rav. Afilu hachi, says Rav, pasla mitruma de beinasha. She is at that point, once the Kohen Gadol brings the almana bas Kohen into the chuppah, she is no longer allowed to eat. The truma de beinasha refers to the truma of her parents' home. The chuppah because according to Rav, chuppah has the power of bia in the sense that it puzzles her from eating truma in her parents' home because she is puzzled as an almana to the Kohen Gadol. All right, so that was Rav's case. We are going to spend the entirety of today just about working on yesh chupal psulos. Is the machlokas Rav and Shmuel parallel to other machlokos? One that we saw in the Mishnah, I believe it's on Nun Vav Amud Beis, yes, that we covered at the beginning of yesterday's shir, and other Mishnayos and Brisos as well. So we are going to begin two lines from the bottom on Nun Zayin Amud Beis. Amar Rami Bar Chama, yesh chupal psulos. So Rami Bar Chama brings this teaching of Rav that yesh chupal psulos, and he says that banu l'machlokas Rabbi Meir Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, and he says that you can take the machlokas that we had in yesterday's Mishnah between Rabbi Meir on the one hand and Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon on the other, and draw it as a parallel to the machlokas of yesh chupal psulos, of does chuppah work when the woman is pasol labia to her husband or not? Top of Nun Ches Amud Aleph. L'Rabbi Meir. Now we're going to unpack this. L'Rabbi Meir, the Amar Kiddushin pasli chuppah pasli, according to Rabbi Meir, who holds in the Mishnah on Nun Vav Amud Aleph that Kiddushin is enough to pasel the woman from the truma that she used to be allowed to eat. Chuppah nami pasla. Chuppah also has the power to pasel. So we could see very easily how Rami Bar Chama could draw the parallel between Rav's opinion of yesh chupal psulos and Rabbi Meir's opinion by Kiddushin.
What are we defining as chuppah?
Bringing her into chuppah. We define chuppah as chuppah. I don't know how to answer.
Okay, no.
The Rabbi Elazar, true. It means to be machnis her beyichud, right? So machnis her into his home. No, it does not mean kiddushin. We're going to see in a second. It does dafka not mean kiddushin, and we're actually going to see in a moment on the second Rashi on the page what it does not mean.
So even symbolic chuppah.
I think it really means is yichud. I think it means yichud, but not necessarily bia, because he brings her into his home. Okay. The second line, the Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Amri Kiddushin lo pasli, and according to Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, who say that the act of kiddushin, because it does not come with bia, because as you recall, kiddushin, which is a synonym for erisin, could have happened up to a year before nisuin, and in most cases there was no bia involved in kiddushin, because she was not puzzled by that bia, she is allowed to continue eating truma from her parents' home. In that case, according to Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, chuppah nami lo pasla. So you could see how, within the opinion of Rami Bar Chama, that the machlokus between Rav and Shmuel, thank you so much, no need, thank you, might parallel the machlokus between in the Mishnah that we had on Amud Beis. Okay, so now asks the Gemara Umimai, why do you think that you can draw such a clean parallel? Dilma ad kan lo kam Rabbi Meir hasam ela b'kiddushin dekanila. Maybe over there in the Mishnah and in Amud Beis, the reason that this woman is no longer allowed to eat truma in her parents' home is because kiddushin is an act of kinyan. Aval chuppah de lo kanila lo, but chuppah, which is not an act of kinyan, maybe she's not puzzled from truma. Take a look at the second Rashi on the page. Chuppah eno kona below kesef oshtar kiddushei bia. Chuppah by itself is not a ma'aseh kinyan. It's a simon of marriage.
But the Machlokas Rav and Shmuel, is that after there's been like a kiddushin already? You know what I'm saying?
I don't think so, because if there's already
It doesn't
kiddushin,
seem like it.
it doesn't seem like
Why are they going straight to the chuppah then? They're doing like we did today?
this was a case. So that first Rashi was a case where the Kohen Gadol was machnis or the chuppah, no kiddushin, no bia.
kiddushin at all.
They went straight to the chuppah.
Straight to
So the shaila was, she's puzzled him. She's an amal Kohen Gadol,
right.
right? So does the chuppah work or not? That was their machlokas. So here, the Gemara wants to say, well, maybe it's not parallel, because maybe the difference between Rabbi Meir's psak in the Mishnah, in our previous Mishnah, and here is that kiddushin has a chalos of a kinyan, chuppah does not. So inami, chuppah de lo kana lo inami, and on the other hand, ad kan lo kamri Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon hasam ela bekiddushin de lo krivi labia. Maybe in our case, maybe in the Mishnah and Amud Beis, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon only said that she was not puzzled to continue eating her parents' truma because kiddushin is not an immediate lead to bia. But chuppah, which is closer to bia, I believe there was a Rashi on this.
Renders her a halala.
It renders her a halala. There is no Rashi, sorry. It renders her a halala because chuppah is him being machnis her into his home, and the next step after that is a bilas nisuin. So the Gemara at this point is concluded that that Rami Bar Chama's parallel does not work. But if you want to draw a parallel between yesh chuppah psulos or ein chuppah psulos and some earlier machlokes of the Kadmonim, the plugsa dahani tanoi. Perhaps it is within the following machlokes. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nהיה bidbaro.
Amen.
Yes, it's terrible. Okay.
You want to switch?
No. The Tanya, with following brisa. Nisu zu v'zu, if this one, and I'm only kidding, if this one and that one marry a Kohen, who are zu v'zu, ksheros, upsulos. So you have those who are eligible to marry a Kohen, those who are ineligible to marry a Kohen. No. And they marry a Kohen. Or they were brought to the chuppah of a Kohen, but he never had bia with them. The important part of that is that they did not become chalalos, the psulos rather did not become the chalalos because of this bia. What is the psak according to the Tanakama? Ochlos mishelo, the ochlos betruma. He has to give them food, and they are allowed to eat truma, his truma. Nichnasu. Now, before we go any further, the Gemara is going to correct some of the language in the Mishnah, which in this brisa rather, which is a bit imprecise. So the second case was nichnasu l'chuppah v'lo nivlu. So nichnasu, that implies mechlal the nisu mamish. That implies that this earlier language of nisu zu v'zu means nisu, literally they got married and had bia. But how can that be? If they had bia, That means he had bia with a woman who was puzzle to him. And of course she can't have truma. Elalav, rather, the Gemara says, what is the Brisa talking about? We're talking about a case where the Kohen brought the ksheros and psulos to the chuppah, but they never had bia. Uktani, ochlos mishalo, ve'ochlos betruma. And the psak there is, according to the Tanna Kama, that chuppah has power and it has a chalos and it works, and therefore the Kohen, because of the power of that chuppah, has to he has to feed her, and she's allowed to eat truma. So what does that sound like? Yesh chuppah l'psulos, because at least one of those women was puzzled to him, but because he never had bia, she's still puzzled to him, but she never became a halala, and therefore she's allowed to eat truma, and he has to support her. Sounds like yesh chuppah l'psulos. And on the other hand, Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer, kol shebiyasa ma'achilasa, chupasa ma'achilasa. Any case where the wife having relations with the husband entitles her to truma, chupasa ma'achilasa. So too the chuppah will. So in our case, if the psula would have bia with the husband, would she be allowed to have truma? Yes or no? No, she's puzzled to him. She becomes an immediate halala. She is not allowed to have truma. Everybody agrees to that. And on the other hand, anybody for whom bia does not permit her to eat, chuppah doesn't work either. So that sounds like ein chuppah l'psulos. So you can see there how this brisa might parallel the machlokas Rav and Shmuel of yesh chuppah l'psulos according to Rav and ein chuppah l'psulos according to Shmuel. So answers the Gemara once again in a now familiar formulation. We've already had this a couple times in the last couple days. Mimai, why are you so sure that this parallel works? Dilma Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Rabbi Meir Svirale, the Amar Kiddushin Lo Achla. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka really holds like Rabbi Meir, who is the Tanna Kama of our Mishnah in Vav Amud Beis, and he says that Kiddushin, that if they have Kiddushin, what was that case over there? Amana l'kohen gadol, grusha b'chalutza l'kohen hedyot min ha'erusin lo yochlu b'truma. They're no longer allowed to eat the truma from their ancestral home, right? Even for erusin. So now the Gemara acknowledges that possibility, but once again we have a language issue. Hi kol she'ein biyasa ma'achilasa in chupasa ma'achilasa, but you're talking about Kiddushin. Our brisa talks about chuppah. So what it really should have said is, Kol she'ein biyasa ma'achilasa, ein kaspa ma'achilasa mibayle. Why didn't it say that anybody whose bia wouldn't work, then her kiddushin, kaspa refers to the kesef kiddushin, that wouldn't work either. So the Gemara says, okay, you're right. The language is off a little, but the point still holds, because Dilma Aidi de Kamar Tana Kama Chuppah, maybe the reason that the brisa used the language of chuppah is because once the Tanna Kama brought a case of chuppah, Amar Ihu Nami chuppah. The Mishnayos, as we've seen, appreciate parallel language. So because it started with chuppah, he answered with chuppah, even though what he really means is kiddushin. So at this point in the Gemara says, you know what? In Achanami, there really is not a parallel. So we've ended with so far without a proof that some of these earlier cases parallel the machlokas Rav and Shmuel over yesh chuppah l'psulos or ein chuppah l'psulos. So now we continue in the Gemara, smack in the middle, Amar Rav Amram. Amar Rav Amram. Ha milsa Amar lan Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes taught us something. Ve'anrinhu la'aynin mimasnisin. And he opened our eyes and proved it from a Mishnah. What was his teaching? Yesh chuppah l'psulos. So we are now within the opinion of Rav. Yesh chuppah l'psulos. V'tana tuna. And what is the Mishnah that proves, according to Rav Sheshes, the yesh chuppah l'psulos? And we're now talking about a case of Sota, and she has to say Amen, Amen. She has to say Amen twice. Rashi, this is about a third of the way down. Amen, Amen, trezimni, l'rabos kol hani, to include the following four situations. What are they? Shelo satisi, I never strayed, whether I was arusa, unesua, or a shomeres yavam ukenusa. So I wasn't, whether I was betrothed or married or awaiting yibum, or kenusa refers here to being brought into the yavam's home. So now, Rav Sheshes, that's Adkan the Mishnah. Rav Sheshes at this point is going to explicate this Mishnah, and his explanation is going to have a lot of problems. So let's go through it. Hi arusa heichidam. When she says shelo satisi arusa, I never strayed while I was in arusa. Remember, we're dealing with sota. She's going to have to drink the meisota because the husband warned her not to be nistera with a certain individual. The Bach adds in the istatra, if he warned her when she was in arusa and she was nister with another man during her erusin, the kamashkala kishihi arusa, and he made her drink the meisota while she was still in arusa. He asks, arusa bas mishtayahi? Is an arusa somebody who's even eligible for the meisota?
No.
Right. V'hatnan arusa v'shomeres yavam lo shosas v'lanotos ksuba. An arusa and a shomeres yavam, these are women who are, for all intents and purposes, equal in their status because they are either engaged or beholden to, at the very least, another man, a man. They don't drink the meisota and they also don't collect ksuba. Ella, this is still Rav Sheshes talking. Ella, dekanila kishihi arusa, the istatra. Rather, he warned her when she was in arusa, and she had stira with another man when she was in arusa. The kamashkela kishihi nesua. However, he only made her drink the meisota after nisuin. Asks the Gemara, mi budki lamaya. Even in that case, will the meisota really check her out to prove her innocence or guilt? V'atanya, we have a brisa. This appears multiple places in Shas. V'nakeh ha'ish me'avon. Thank you. V'nikah ha'ish me'avon. That in order for the meisota to work, the husband also has to have kind of a clean record. When the man has not committed some sort of avera as part of this specific marriage, that's when the meisota will work. And when he's not clean in this whole process, the mind doesn't work. So what are we talking about here? If they had erusin, and he warned her, and she was nister with another man, guess what? Midoraisa, she's puzzled to him. So if then he brings her in an esbia with her, that's his avera. And if he does not have a clean record as part of this process, the meisota doesn't work. The meisota will not work. Ella, says Rav Sheshes, what are we talking about? Dekanila kishihi arusa. He warned her when she was in arusa. Ve'istatra, and she had stira with a man while she was in arusa. Ve'nichnesa lechuppah, and then her husband, her arus, brings her to the chuppah. V'lo nivela, and he never had bia with her. So he's clean. She's been warned. Ushma mina, yesh chuppah l'psulos. So Rav Sheshes concludes from this very short Mishnah and his lengthy explication of that Mishnah that because even though she would have been puzzled to him because she had stira during erusin, we see the chuppah works. And he never had bia with her. So we see that chuppah works even in a case of psulos. Amar Rava v'tizbara dahamitaratza. Rava says, Rav Sheshes, do you really think that Mishnah that you quoted works to prove the yesh chuppah psulos? There's a whole lot wrong with that. And here we go. Let's explain what's wrong with it. V'haki asa Rabbi Achab bar.
Unless she is fully his wife, that's the nivala. He can't bring her to the Mesa.
Why? Why not? The issue actually, sorry to keep you waiting. The issue actually is not whether he has bia with her, it's who has bia with her first. We're going to see in 1 second. The Gemara is going to play this out. 5 lines up from the bottom. V'haki us. So this is now, again, here's where we are in the Gemara. Rav Sheshes said, I'm going to bring you a proof from Sota that yesh chuppah l'psulin. Rav Sheshes concluded his proof. Rava is jumping all over him to say that there is so much wrong with Rav Shesh's proof that it can't possibly work. So this is Rav's question. Amar Rabba B'Tizbara Dahavi Mitaratzei. You think that what you just brought from Sota proves the point that Yesh Chapa LeKedushin? V'haki asa Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina miDaroma. But when Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina came from the south, asa v'aisi masnisa biyade. He came with a Mishnah in his hand, Mibala de Isheich. We learn from the pasuk that ends with the words Mibala de Isheich. Misha kad mashchivas ba'al leboel. When does Sota work? This is only when the Baal, the husband, had bia with the suspected wife before the other guy. Velosha kad mashchivas boel lebal, but not in a case where he brought her to the chuppah but never had bia with her. So at that point, the only person who's had bia with her is the guy who isn't her husband. In that case, the Mesota is not going to work. So therefore, what you just explained, Rav Sheshes, cannot possibly be. Amar Rabbi Bar Chama, says Rabbi Bar Chama, I'm going to correct this for you. Mashkachas la kagon sheba aleha arusa beveis habia. That's a case where he had bia with his arusa at her father's house, right? So then, who had bia with her first?
He did.
The arus. Who had bia with her second? Potentially not the arus. So here's the order of operation. Arison, bia between the arus and arusa. She was nisra with somebody else. He warned her, or he was suspected. Then she had bia with somebody else. Then he brings her to chuppah. Then he makes her drink mesota. So according to Rami Bar Chama, that should work enough. That should work to prove. I told you it was confusing. That should work.
He's not supposed to do.
Hold on, please. That should work enough to prove yesh chuppah lepsulos, because she was pasula to him.
So mesota would work.
Here's the problem. We said, if you look about a third of the way up in the Gemara, amein shelo satisi arusa v'nesua shomer yavim v'uknusa, which means that these cases are all parallel. Asks the Gemara, Dikavasa gabi shomer yavim shabalea. So what about a case where she also has to swear that even if she was a shomer yavam, she never had to be with the guy, with anybody else. So the kavasa gabi shomer yavam shabalea yavam beveis chamia. So that must also be a case where the yavam had bia with the shomeres yavam. This is his sister-in-law from his deceased, who was married to his now deceased brother. Maybe he had bia with his shomeres yavam at her father's house.
Oh wait, then she's
Hold on. The Gemara is very good at this. Let the Gemara explain.
Okay.
Turn the page. Non chesam beis. Asks the Gemara. The problem is that shomeres yavam karis leishto ma'alya. If the yavam has bia with the yavama, what just happened? Yimu. They're married. So if she goes ahead and swears that I never strayed from well, guess what? You've just done yibum deoraisa.
Right.
So you're fully married to the guy. What are you talking about? Rav. Again, we're still in the opinion of Rav. Remember, this is a blot and a half of trying to figure out Rav. Kana lakol. We learned a couple days ago, maybe a few days ago, that Rav says that any bia with a shomeres yavam, bishogeg, b'mezid, bechavana, lo bechavana, kedarka, shalo kedarka, no matter what, that counts, and that's a full marriage. So if that's the case, we have a big problem with Rav Shesh's explication of his proof that yesh chuppah lepsulos. Answers the Gemara, no problem. I got you covered. I'm just going to answer Kishmuel. The Amar lo kana elod v'ramam parsha. He says, you know what? You're right. Rav's kind of a problem, so I'm going to prove it to you from Shmuel's case, who says you need kavana. It can't be falling off a roof. It can't be bishogeg. You have to have kavana for yibu. How does that sit with all of you? We've just proved it from Shmuel that Rav is right. The only problem is he's Rav's bar plukta. Asks the Gemara midehu taima ela de Rav. Ela the Rav. This whole thing is coming to prove Rav. Rav's shita minei ubei is a problem because ha'amar Rav kana lakol. So the problem with Rav Sheshes is that nothing he says seems to work. If Rav Sheshes' proof of Rav is from Rav's bar plukta Shmuel, that's kind of messed up, and it does not work. Answers the Gemara, I'm going to find a way to make Rav's shita work. Hacha b'mayaskinan kegon de avad ba maimer ubeishamai hi de amri maimer kona kinyan gomor. Maybe it's a case where the Yavam did Maimer with the Shomeres Yavam. And within the opinion of Beis Shammai, he says, Maimer Kona Kinyan Gomer. That is a complete and total Kinyan. So what's the case? You have a Yavam and a Shomeres Yavam. He did Maimer with her, which releases her from the Zika of Yavam. So she can say cleanly that she never was nisser with a man while she was a Shomeres Yavam. That's how that case works within the explanation of Rav Sheshes that yesh chupel psulin. Okay, so put a period right there. That's the answer of how we explain that Rav Sheshes's explication of yesh chupel psulin from the Mishnah and Sota actually works. Now, okay, so we've explained all of that. Ihachi, says the Gemara. Remember, in the Sota swore 4 things. What were they? Arusa, Nesua, Shomeres Yavam, and Kenusa. Asks the Gemara, Ihachi, Hainu, Arusa. But if you just said that he did Maimer with her, Maimer is the equivalent of Erusin, so why are you teaching me a double case? Asks the Gemara, L'tamech. Well, if that's your question, Nesua, Kenusa, Lav Chada Milsehi, aren't Nesua and Kenusa, because what's Kenusa? Kenusa is Yibum. Those are the same things. So she just said, I didn't do it, this, and this. Yeah, it's the equivalent of Nesuin. It's the equivalent of Nesuin. The whole question is how valid is chuppah, right? So Ella, says the Gemara, when she says Nesua, Erusin, and Nisuin, and Shomeres Yavam, and Kenusa, we are referring to 4 different cases. Ella, Nesua Dide, her that would marriage to him, Kenusa de Chavre, and it was the Kenusa was a Shomeres Yavam that he never asked for. Hachanami Arusa Dide b'Shomeres Yavam de Chavre. So there are 4 different cases. One is his own Arusa and his own Nesua. One is his Shomeres Yavam, again, the wife he didn't ask for, and the Shomeres Yavam that he was eventually Kones, period. Rav Papa gives a completely different interpretation of Yesh Chupel Psulin. Hi Tana, Hu Detanya. Rav Papa says that here's what we're talking about, that the Tana who holds, excuse me, Yesh Chupel Psulos is the following. Ein mekanin la arusa lahashkosa kashihi arusa. As we said, that the husband who warns the wife while she is in arusa cannot give her the mesota to drink while she's in arusa. Aval mekanin osa lahashkosa kashi nesua. However, once they are already married, he can give her mesota to drink if she was nistera to him. It is my understanding that what he's talking about here is a classic case of sota, where she was nister under his nisuin, and he had already warned her. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar al Yedei Gilgal. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says it's not that she that she was nistera with somebody else during nisuin, and then he can drink her mesota because of that stira during nisuin. It's that if she was nistera as an arusa, and then she perhaps was nistera again as a nesua, he can bring her to the Beis HaMikdash, force her to make a shvua on any stira while they were married, and once he's already doing that, he can also make her swear that she wasn't nistera when she was in arusa. So we see from both Rav Papa and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak in their own way that yesh chupel psulos, because it's possible that they were nister even as arusos, and yet we allow the chuppah to go forward. Sholach Rav Chanina mishmei Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Chanina sent in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Ha'osa maimer b'yavimto v'yesh lo ach. Let's say somebody does kiddushin or maimer rather with a shomeres yavam, but yet he has another brother who's potentially available. Afilu hu kohen v'hi kohenes pasla mina truma. Even if he's a kohen and she is a bas kohen, she is not allowed to eat truma. Now, according to whom is that psak? Ilema the Rabbi Meir. If you'll say it's like Rabbi Meir, who on Memvavam with Beis says that an arusa to a kohen is no longer allowed to eat truma from her parents' home. Excuse me. Ilema the Rabbi Meir. Maybe Rabbi Meir says that a mishtameres, that a woman who is waiting for a biapsula can't eat from truma. Maybe that's only in a case of deoraisa. For example, a manala kohen gadol or a grusha, but not a chalutza, because chalutza is midarabanan. A grusha to a kohen hedyot, maybe that's only if it's deoraisa. But derabanan miyamar. But derabanan, did Rabbi Meir ever say? So maybe she's still allowed if it was only maimer. Maimer's only derabanan. The Ella, the Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. Well, maybe if you'd like to say that it's Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon from our Mishnah, maybe they hold that she is allowed from, maybe they've said that Dioraisa, she's allowed to eat. Well, if that's the case, the Rabbanim Mibaya, well then, of course, according to them, she'd be allowed to eat because there's nothing to even talk about. If Dioraisa, she's allowed, certainly Diorabanan, she's allowed. So it can't be that the case we have here, a maimer b'yavimto b'yesh lo ach, even if they're both kohanim or she's a bas kohen, that she's pasla mina truma. So who is that opinion like? Rather, when Rabin came from Babel to Eretz Yisrael, he said that if a yavam does maimer with his yavama, even if he has brothers, according to everybody, she can continue to eat truma de beinasha. She can continue to eat truma from her own parents' home because she's a bas kohen. However, yesh lo ach halal. But what if the father had children from different wives, one of whom was puzzled to him, which means that one of her children is a kohen halal. Sorry, one of the father's sons was a kohen halal. One of the father's surviving sons is a regular kosher kohen. If that's the case, and you've got a yavama, divrei hakol eina ochelas. Why not?
She goes to both.
Because she goes to both, and the zika to the chalal is deoraisa, right?
Yeah.
He is a kohen, but he's a kohen chalal. That's the problem. So her zika to him makes her usher. That is strong enough to passel her from eating her parents' truma. So, but those are divrei hakol. No,
More than one brother.
it has to be more than one brother, and one's a chalal. There's only one brother surviving, and he's a kosher kohen. Go right ahead, no problem. Right? She can continue. If any did mimer, she can continue to eat truma from her parents' house. So right now we've got a bunch of divrei hakols. So what's the machlokas? Lo nechluku ela shenasan la get. This is only a case where the yavam gave the shomeres yavam a get. Rabbi Yochanan amar ochelas, Reish Lakish amar ena ochelas. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, she's allowed to eat truma from her parents' home if she got a get, and Reish Lakish says she is not. And now, until the end of the two dots, we're going to explain these two opinions. Rabbi Yochanan amar ochelas afilu Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yochanan says that she can eat in her parents' house, even according to Rabbi Meir, for the same reason as we explained before. The Amar ena ochelas, because Rabbi Meir said that she's not allowed to eat hani mila mishtameres l'bi apsula deoraisa. That's only when she is then she's awaiting a biapsula deoraisa. But a yavam who gave a shomeres yavam a get, bia with her is only derabanan. Aval derabanan achla. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, he's holding like Rabbi Meir says in the case of derabanan, it's no problem. She can continue to eat. For Reish Lakish, Amar ena ochelas, and Reish Lakish who says that she's not allowed to eat truma de beinasha, that's afilu the Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. Because what do they say? They say ochelas. They say in our Mishnah that in the case of kedushin, she's allowed to eat. But what is that? Hani mili de yesh lo lahachil b'makom acher. That's only in a case where the kohen, in another similar situation, would be allowed to give his own wife truma. Aval hacha dekevin the ein lo lahacha b'makam acher lo. But when a Kohen, again, we're talking about a case where a Kohen gave his shomeres yavam a get, and a Kohen who gives his shomeres yavam a get, is he allowed to give her truma? No. So in every other case, the reason I got caught on this in preparing, but the reason that this is a case of b'makom acher is not a Kohen to any other woman. It's a Kohen to any other grusha of his cannot give her truma. So according to Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Shimon, they say that in that case, because the Yavam, who was a Kohen, gave his Shomeres Yavam, who is a Bas Kohen, a get, any situation like that, he's not going to be allowed to give her truma. I asked the Gemara, maybe he will be allowed to give it to her because yesh lo lahachila b'chozeres. Maybe if he were to remarry, if the Yavam, who's a Kohen, who gave his Shomeres Yavam a get, remarried her, then he would be allowed to give her truma. The Gemara says, chozeres paska mine v'krova le'nasha, that in a case where he brings her back, she was completely separated from him and closer once again to her parents' house. Aval ha, but in this case, Agida Bey, she still has connection to him. Why? Because she never did chalitza, which means she still has the shomeres yavam status, mideoraisa, without chalitza, which means she was never completely separated from him like a regular divorcee was from a regular case of gerushin. Okay, very confusing daf. Tomorrow you have Rabbi Noach Goldstein Shlita.